Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Hicks with another EarthWorks podcast. We're doing things a little bit differently this week. I'm going to pull a pretty long clip of a previously recorded podcast that I did with Dave Wilber back from, if you're interested in listening to the whole thing, I'm cutting off about the last 30 minutes of it, but it was recorded on the 14th of December of 2021. But there's so much good information in there, and it's kind of a setup for a podcast that I'm going to record in the near future with several of our clients that have done construction projects over the last couple of years. There's so much construction going on right now in the industries, whether it's sports turf or golf, that I wanted to get a few of our clients on and talk about what they really did well during their projects and what they'd do differently if they had it to do over again. Everybody kind of records that, I guess, that gosh, that worked really well, or man, that was a disaster. I wish I could do that over again. So I've had several of our clients that have agreed to come on for maybe 10 minutes or something and just kind of talk about those successes and those things that they'd like to have another opportunity to do again. But we've worked with countless folks in the industry, in the green industry in general, over the last 30 plus years on construction. Renovate, Myco, Ecolite, Myco Replenish being kind of our three our three-legged stool of construction, along with obviously soil testing and things like that. But really wanted to highlight some of that. Got Dave on several years ago, like I said, that has been involved with so many projects throughout the world, and his insights into construction, I think, are invaluable. So I wanted to replay that. Like I said, if you want to go back in the archives, the 14th of December 2021 was the original recording. Feel free to listen to that. At the end, we kind of talked about some non-negotiables and things that he just felt were imperative during any construction project. And I cut that part out, but this is kind of a lead into a podcast that you'll hear in the next couple of weeks. Definitely wanted to highlight some things that we've done in the Western U.S. And then, like I said, we'll review with some turf managers what they said, what they thought went really, really well, and also what they'd do differently if they had it to do over again.
Hi, everybody. Kevin Hicks with EarthWorks, back for another podcast. Haven't done one in a little while. Pretty excited to have Mr. Dave Wilber back on. It's been several months, I think, since we've talked, hasn't it?
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good. We've got kind of a grab bag today, and we kind of went over it a little bit beforehand, but this will be a free-flowing conversation, and hopefully we'll cover some topics that are pertinent to what all of you are dealing with right now. Excuse me for a minute.
As you can see, I'm very casual. I got the Carhartt hoodie on today, and I'm just hanging in the office, and it's snowing in Denver. It's a good time to be thinking about things.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the direction I'd like this to take. And I keep looking at my notes so I don't forget something. But want to talk a little bit about start with maybe some of the vast experience you've had with construction, and I think first and foremost, there's a lot of clubs that are, they've seen their revenues come up considerably in the last couple of years. Some of them are sitting on some reserves, and they're if they're not already doing it, they're thinking about renovation projects, restoration projects. So I wanted to talk about some of the pitfalls that superintendents and clubs can avoid from the get-go, really, but also during the process. What disasters can you warn people about that hey, we've done this, we've seen this, don't go down that path? I mean, that's pretty broad.
we're talking about renovation and restoration, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In that genre. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, uh, the like what I like to do is go back and look at the stuff that's worked and the stuff that hasn't worked, and and why.
Sure.
Right. And unfortunately,
Exactly.
a lot of times we've really had to do some really strong post-mortem stuff on like, what happened. And it's not like there's been, what is a failure? I don't know. I don't know what you would call, a failure. Anytime you're trying to improve something and do something better, you could look at it positively and say, well, we did this and this is a good thing.
Sure.
But and the other thing is, I hear a lot of people talking about money and being cost conscious and all that sort of stuff, but I think they have no concept about where to cut costs and where not to.
Right.
Or how to budget plan in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to, rebuild a couple greens and do some bunkers and fix that tee and all that, and it's like, what's it going to cost, right? Everybody wants to hear that number first.
Let's go right to the bottom right corner first.
And
Before discussing goals or anything else, right?
Yeah. And the big pitfall is tossing a number out.
Right.
Because that's the only one they're going to remember.
From the superintendent side.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Because I've done
What's that going to cost? Well, gosh, I think we could do that for, 450,000.
Right.
That's the only number and then when you sit down and then they start adding a little bit of work to it and while we're here, let's do that concrete and we got, oh shit, I forgot we got to move that main line if we're going to do that, here it comes. Right. And then you come back to him and say, well, yeah, I know we talked about 450, but it looks like it's going to be more like, 560. And there it starts. And what that starts is this doubt,
and a loss of credibility.
Right. Does Mr. Superintendent really know what he's talking about?
Right.
And so what I would always do with people when they would call me up and start to talk about, renovation, restoration, right? And restoration is maybe a different animal, because there's some artwork involved and, you don't always know, right? If we're really going to take the 1929 aerial and put the bunkers back, there's a lot of things that happened between 1929 and now. And,
Sure.
there's a lot of archaeology involved in that. But the startling thing to me, Kevin, is that I would say to, superintendent calls me up and say, well, they want to do this, that, or the other, whatever it is. And immediately I want to think about it like a contractor would think about it, or like, and I want to, okay, how many square feet is that? How many acres is that?
Right.
How many, like those are the numbers.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Well, look, let's start with that. Okay. So you want to do a bunch of T-tops. Well, get out there with the wheel and a tape measure and a laser and start figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
We got to do 300 and whatever, square feet or I'm sorry, I'm just throwing numbers around, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And don't estimate and it's about, 320 square feet per, no. Like,
and we've got tools that can get us down to the gnats behind at this point.
You could get on Google Earth and get really close.
Right.
Really. I mean, it's like we have crazy tools now, but there's no substitute for the tape measure and the wheel.
That's right. So this might be jumping ahead, but at what point is it important to have an outside agency involved in the planning process, i.e. an architect or a land planner or whatever it might be? I will use architect as the example, but at what point, is it a dollar figure, or is it what parts of the golf course you're gonna address that you should have somebody, almost as much as protection for the superintendent as protection for the project and the membership?
Well, yeah, I think, I've made my living as an independent consultant, since I quit being a golf course superintendent in the 90s. And sure, I'm going to sit here and say, hire a good consultant, right? I mean,
Sure.
It's not surprising that I would feel that way, but I don't think there's ever been a situation where I haven't saved pretty close to what my fees were, working with somebody, right?
Just with the experience.
Yeah, keeping them out of trouble, or just, looking over a contractor's shoulder, or bringing in an architect and saying, "Hey, Mr. Architect, that's a nice idea, but that's
Right.
that's not in the cards."
Yeah, you're in Denver now. That doesn't work here.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever.
Or the other thing is that I walked into so many situations, Kevin, where the really good intentions of, hey, we could really fix our golf course up over, X number of years. I mean, to simplify things, we could do 3 greens a year for 6 years, and
right,
and that turns out to be a real fail.
Oh.
The members hate it. Everybody hates it.
They hate you.
The pricing, doesn't work.
Yep.
It invites a lot of armchair architects to come in and second guess, the first thing that you do, and
constant state of disruption.
Yeah, and then everybody's scared of their shadow for the next thing, and it's like, no. So we're really actually against that kind of idea. I think in the past it used to be a very, we'll do this many bunkers a year, this many greens a year,
based on a master plan or what have you, right?
That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
So the master plan, which I think for a lot of people was a beautiful tool, has probably caused more boardroom fights than just about anything that I've been involved with, as far as sitting in the,
Yeah.
And the worst thing, that I'm thinking about a bunch of situations where the architect did this beautiful job putting together master plan materials, and this stuff goes up in the, in the clubhouse somewhere. Here's our master plan. We're so proud of it. And the dudes are walking by with their whiskeys, just hating the thing.
Whiskey's in a Sharpie, right?
They've never seen one of these things before. They don't even know they're going to move that bunker. I don't want them to fill in that bunker. And it just like, okay, so yeah, we won't do that. We're going to have the town hall meeting. And those can be tricky. They worked out really good. I saw Brad Klein handle a town hall meeting for an architect, which I thought was brilliant. The California Golf Club. They hired Brad as a consultant. They had me, and they had Kyle Phillips as the architect. And Brad, with his vast knowledge of architecture and what's right and wrong and all that sort of stuff, made amazing presentations. And they had 2 key members who had already gone out and met with small groups of people and done the, sold it to them before any of this material ever got put up or done anything. So what I'm getting at is the, premature numbers, premature big ideas. Here's our master plan.
Right.
Things like that are huge pitfalls.
And piecemealing it from there.
And I know some of my architect friends are going to hear this and they go, well, dude, I'm trying, we got to have a plan. We got to have a roadmap and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yes, you do. But there are really much better ways to present that than, the way that we've been doing it.
Yeah.
And this idea that we're going to save the club money by putting the 10-year master plan in place it's never saved money.
Right.
We would have been lots better off, closing half the golf course, or 3, 6, 7 holes, whatever it is.
Yep.
Getting all that work done, opening it up to greatness, and moving on.
Yeah.
But the 10-year plan to dink around to save money is not a saving.
The one contrary to that argument that I've lived through was it does help allocate resources. If a club's not going to assess, and they're working it into their operating budget, that is a good thing. But I've got a club here locally that has been working through a master plan, 2 different architects, 2 different superintendents, and gosh, at least 10 years worth of work, and they're not even close to done. And they're exactly where you're describing. They're, the members are fighting with each other. And then there's another factor that's worked into this is with the influx of new memberships, instead of being short 30 members, they've now got a waiting list of 35 people.
Right.
The demographic of the new member has changed remarkably. And so now you've got these factions in the club that are completely different, and they want different goals. And, one wants flash and one wants nothing ever changed, because I joined here in 1941, and I've been happy with it ever since. And you're right. It's a tough one. The longer you stretch it out, I think the more painful it gets.
So, it's been my pleasure to be given a couple of honorary memberships, or whatever you want to call it, to some different places that we've worked on. I mean, what a nice thing.
Sure.
And, I don't really aspire to be a country club member. And while I love the game and I love golf, I don't, I'm not going to play golf every day.
Right.
And I don't live in some of these places, but, thank you for the member number. That's awesome.
Right.
It's nice. Right.
Yeah.
And it's a nice thing, and it's a very classy thing. But, I'm thinking back to 40-year-old Dave Wilber, 15 years ago, and the kind of golf I wanted to play and what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had just been dipped in Scotland. I had just, Walter Woods had taught me how to hit the low ball. I want to play the tough stuff, man. Sure. I want to play on the windy day. I want to do all that, And then now today, 55-year-old Dave, whose knees are jacked and all kinds of other stuff. What I want to do is I want to go out and play 9 and, and maybe have 3 clubs in my little quiver.
Right.
Right. And so that's 55-year-old Dave. And then what's 65-year-old Dave going to want to do on the golf course? And so, I mean, that's the thing that I think a lot of these people don't think. They say, well, here's our 10-year master plan. Well, that guy who's sitting at the, at the board meeting, or that man or that woman, I shouldn't be that way. When they're 55, it's like, yeah, that's what we should do. And then, a hip replacement, a knee surgery, and oh damn, why did we sign off on these bunkers being so deep?
Wow, that's a great. I never thought about that. Just the length of time to finish a master plan, and how much, because I'm the same way. I've moved up a set of tees now, and I'm not proud. I could care less. I got kids that can outdrive me by 50 yards, so I've I've moved up just to give myself an edge.
Yeah, the golf that I want to play is just so different.
Great point.
And yes, there was a period of time in my golf thing when I actually thought I might get good at golf. Jim Farron and I were, competing with each other, and Jim was such a great golfer. And all I wanted to do was just, if I could get good enough to beat Jim in a match play every now and then, by virtue of, being able to pull some really good shots out of the bag now and then, and to be able to negotiate how many strokes he was going to give me and have a great match, that was my goal, right? This is like, it wasn't about a number or anything. It's just, I want to be competitive and beat Farron.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or not look like an elf, when I'm, with a new prospective client or something.
Yep. Totally.
And, Mark Parsonen used to talk about that with me all the time. Mark was such a great striker of the ball, but he wasn't always that way. He worked at it constantly, to get great. And he said, I want to have the credibility that it needs to, to do that. Right.
And that's true for superintendents too, I think.
It is.
You don't have to be a scratch golfer, but you
sure. But at a certain point, your game is going to change.
Yeah.
So, again, going back to what I said, okay, the 10-year master plan. Well, who are we selling that to? Is it the 45-year-old junior member who, has just started, their company's doing pretty good and they have time to play golf now?
Right.
Or it's just, it can get really convoluted. And I think that's where, going back to the original question, what are the pitfalls? The pitfalls so many times for people are not looking at the end and working the problem backwards.
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to end up with, and when?
Right. And why? Yeah.
Why do we do that?
Right.
And if we don't, and so it comes to the question: if we don't do that, let's say, okay, we have to talk about the horrible, awful, we don't talk about it, subject of trees.
Right.
What I've done with a lot of people who have been don't touch my trees kind of thing is like, what is that going to look like in 10 years if we don't do some work right now?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Those trees are going to close over that green even more, whatever it is. Right. That slot that you're already hitting out of, from the tee box is only going to get, so come on, we have to do something here.
That same group may struggle with the reality that trees grow though, too. So you might not win that battle.
Yeah, but I think
I know what
I
you're
think
saying.
it's like, and so it's great to go back and find those pictures from 10 years before, not the 1929 pictures.
Right.
But look at the ones from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Say, okay, well, this is what it looked like 10 years ago, and you haven't touched it. Now it looks like this. So where's the next step?
Right? I went through a discussion with a committee one time when I was at Desert Forest about bunkers and the buildups, from the sand casting on the green side of the bunker, which is a real thing. I couldn't believe that, even as a young guy, I couldn't believe that I was having that argument and that discussion. So one of the things I did from that point until I left was there was a sprinkler that I picked on every hole in front of the green and took a landscape shot of the green complex once a year, same time every year, just to show, and just filed it away. Nothing more, nothing less. Maybe somebody used it later on, but taking pictures on a periodic basis from the same point of the same thing to show some of those things. Like you said, trees, that's another one that
yeah, I mean, I know, trees, they're this whole controversial thing, but you're right. You're talking about the natural evolution of what happens to a playing surface when it gets played on.
Yeah.
And we can't avoid that unless it's not, as John Fleming used to say, it's not a museum, Wilber. They use it.
Right. Exactly right.
So I just, I guess, that end game. Okay, what do we want to be? And the successful stuff that has, that I've seen, not just the successful stuff I've been part of or whatever, but the stuff I've seen is, like, what what do you want to end up with here? I mean, maybe you don't know exactly, but you can find those 4 or 5 talking points for just about every situation that needs to be fixed, and say these are the 4 things that really need to be fixed here.
Right.
That. Okay, so now we got that. Now we can start doing the architecture, the archaeology, the agronomy, the underground, the above ground agronomy, all of it, right? Because nobody ever wants to talk about what's under the ground, but we have that. And now we can get to some real numbers and some real schedules.
Yeah.
And some real expectations, and it's real defensible. And if somebody says, if somebody comes to that town hall meeting, that committee meeting, and they say, well, I don't like that, it's like, okay, well, what's your talking point? And then saying, well, that just sucks. I don't like that, whatever.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, here are the 4 things that this area, this hole, this, whatever it is, needs to have happen. Why is yours more important than these? And then they kind of go, oh, I should think about that. And then and that's where the salesmanship comes in.
Right. And I think it probably exposes, it has the potential of exposing some hidden agendas by individuals that could really muck things up later on. Right. I mean, if you got the 2 handicapper that's driving the bus on the whole conversation, his objectives are completely different than yours and mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, okay, so we're building these talking points, and we're going to settle on these talking points. And if one of the talking points is developed by that 2 handicapper that doesn't apply to anybody, you really got to look at that and say, why is that on the list?
Yep.
And to me, that's real planning.
Right.
To me, that says, well, we have a chance here now, to do this, to talk about this, to try to see if we've got the money, like you said, we got to plan this into the whole thing. And then we get to the how. Right. And this is always the sticky glue. And I don't want to get ahead of your questions, but that point right there is what is like, okay, how do we get it done?
Right.
Is it you, Mr. Superintendent, and 6 or 7 of your guys out there, with shovels? Or, are we talking about a contractor? Are we talking about multiple contractors? Where do we go next? And the how starts to become, okay, we know exactly what we want to do, and we know exactly why we want to do it.
Right.
And now we got to figure out how to do it. And those require some really honest conversations. And golf course superintendents, God, I love golf course superintendents so much, just as a species, right?
Right.
Because all of us, and Kevin, I know you, and I know you've been there, and I was there, and I'm still this way. I mean, even around my own home, I want to do it.
Right.
I want to do it.
Right.
That
you're leading right into my next question.
Okay, good.
What's What's the tipping point? Because for every person on your staff that you take away to do that project, you're taking away from something that needs to be done on a daily basis. So where's the balance?
The thing I realized one day when I was struggling to get a green complex done, just one green complex with a superintendent and his crew, right? And we're talking about, I'm not going to say any names, but it's somebody that we both know, and he's a genius, right? He's a mad genius, and his crew is just super polished, and I mean, they have it down. You know, the shop doors roll up in the morning, and it's precision.
Sure.
You can look at your watch and say it, it's 6:36. This guy is exactly at that bunker, boom, right? And it's amazing. So you want to think of people like that and say, man, I've got an A crew.
Right.
These guys have been with me a long time. They're an A crew. This is my, but that's golf course maintenance. And that's got nothing to do, zero to do with working with an architect, keeping a construction schedule, going with the changes, all that sort of stuff.
Having the equipment and the technology and the know-how.
Even with the equipment. I had a superintendent say to me one time, I have a guy on my crew can run anything. Oh, really? Really? How much time has he got on a knuckle bucket?
Right. And we got a 40-year-old backhoe in the back that we're going to use to do the project.
Yeah, I get it, man. I don't want to say anything bad about that guy. I'm sure that his experience with you, yes, he's the guy. If you want to go, put him on the front end loader and pop up some concrete or something like that, or some asphalt because you're pouring concrete. Yes, he's the guy to do that.
Right.
But we're talking about something like that bunker behind you.
Yeah.
And working with a Jim Urbina or somebody like that who's done tons of those, and they don't really have a lot of time, for on-the-job training.
Right.
Right.
And nor do they need it.
Well, it's just, yeah. It's like, okay. And in some situations, like we found we were doing the San Francisco Golf Club, and Bob Kleinstecker, gave Jim some guys, and Jim trained those guys up, and they became the A players, right? But Bob could afford to have those guys not doing anything else on the golf course. They were almost like extra employees.
Sure.
In a way, because he saw it coming.
Yeah.
And yes, we're going to teach you guys the technical aspect of doing a Tillinghast bunker, the Urbino way. I mean, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
That something like that, that kind of works, right?
Right.
But when you're talking about a superintendent looking at me and say, well, we fix pipe every day, Dave, if we have to put in a new main line and a whole bunch of laterals and a whole bunch of heads and a whole bunch of swing joints, we got this. Oh, really? Where's your wire pulling rig?
Right.
Huh?
Right.
What's that? Right? And it's like, no, yes, you're very capable, and I'm sure you have this great irrigation tech, but no, it's just no.
Especially not when there's still a golf course to be maintained.
Yeah. And so what are you going to do with that great irrigation guy? Greens are burning up because he's over here helping us on the construction thing, and his, and that satellite went down. Oh, well, I got to pull him out of here. Right. Superintendent comes over to the project side with his hair on fire.
Yeah.
And says, Jethro's got to come with me. I got a clock, that Mr. Hammersmith just ran over with a cart, and we got to figure it out. Oh, I guess we don't do any construction work today, huh?
Right.
Those situations are so bad. And so, it's cringy because like, I want everybody to learn new stuff. I'm all about teaching people new stuff. I'm all about everybody learning, never stop learning is like this big mantra that I tell people.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, I want your crew to learn to do construction and drainage and all those sorts of things. But if there are some situations where that is just not practical or possible.
Right.
And to know that and to figure that out and to skip your ego for just a second and skip that, I can do it. We can do anything, kind of mentality. It's hard.
So what goes into the decision that it's too much for us? And when you're right, it's hard because it's our golf course, right? It's the superintendent takes ownership of that property to a fault. I know because I've done that. I've been there. But there's points at which, number one, your expertise aren't to the level of being able to complete it like a contractor. But number two, you're gonna stress out your crew. You're gonna stretch them thin. So how would you counsel a superintendent on a project to say, dude, it's trust me, it's too much for your staff to tackle? And I know it's always different, but I don't think it's a very big scope that I don't think it has to get to a very big scope to say you're gonna sacrifice something else.
Yeah, I don't actually. It's not a hard sell for me anymore,
Right?
Because it's a conversation of brutal honesty.
Yeah.
It's saying to a superintendent, listen, I get it, man. You love your crew, you love your staff. They're your A players. They're the people that you rely on every day to get the job done. That's awesome, right?
Right.
But and a lot of people say, well, there's this, like, everything you say before the word "but" is bullshit. That's not true. But I think you really have to make an honest, ego-free assessment and say, and the way I approach it, Kevin, is just simply by man hours.
Yeah.
And I go, I just throw some of my formulas at some stuff. Okay, we have, and it goes back to knowing the numbers, right? We have this many square feet of this to do, and this many linear feet of that to do.
Yeah.
And now we've broken the project up, right? We know how much pipe we're going to buy, how many heads we're going to, whatever it is. We know the project. And so then I look at the golf course superintendent and say, from a production standpoint, because now we don't work any overtime in our business.
Right.
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 It isn't sun up, sun down for all your staff.
Right.
Is it? So I go, from a production standpoint, we should expect to be able to do this many feet of this and that many feet of that, and with this many people. And so, can you spare that? Can you give me 10 guys?
Right.
So that we can keep this timeline. Oh no, Dave, no way. I've only got 14 on the staff. I said, well, there's your answer.
Right.
Because I have to get this many man hours a day in order to meet our end thing. So working backwards, again, here's our end, here's our date, here's our, we figured out the project. I don't see how this works in-house.
Oh, and by the way, would you furnish me with your labor hours for maintaining the golf course to the members' expectation level?
Yeah, sure. Well,
and then let's compare those and see if there's any slop. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of people still. And I really think in this day and age of spreadsheets and whatever, that if you don't have a good man hours summary together, and I was hyper focused about it, and partly because I was enjoying the computer programming end of it. My guys filled out a card, and they accounted for every 15 minutes of what they did, right? So I knew how many hours we spent raking bunkers, how many hours of shop time, whatever, wash time.
Yeah. I
drove them crazy with that stuff. Yeah. I probably didn't have to go that far, but at the end of a period of time, I knew exactly how many hours it took to do what we did on our golf course. And so if somebody came to me and said, can we do this or not do that or whatever, I knew what those answers were, and I knew what the money was.
Right.
And so I'm startled at people that still can't, have that conversation, because the people that they're working with, whether it's the GM or the ownership or the board, they're doing that in their businesses.
Absolutely.
They are.
Yeah. They
have to right now. And that's only gotten deeper. So, word to the wise, Mr. and Miss Superintendent, if you can't explain where your hours are going, expect somebody to take them away from you.
And they may not ask for it, but if you have it to present, then
you get ahead of that.
Yeah, your credibility grows by leaps and bounds.
Sure. And and it becomes less of a, hey, everybody's sitting around going, I know I need 2 more people. Well, let's go figure that out and sell that.
Why and where, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a superintendent called me, and his key people were not taking their vacation hours, and it was starting to really add up, and it was starting to be kind of a thing. And they had a controller for a while who was kind of okay with every December just cutting everybody a big check and saying, here's Christmas money, and then new GM, new controller. No, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
It's like, my mechanic can't be gone,
In July.
Do you have anybody assisting him? Do you have anybody that knows? No. Okay, let's talk that through. Let's figure this out and say, okay, if we do it the way we're doing it, that 2,080 hours, that somebody should be working, we actually need 3,000 hours.
Right.
So here's my other half, here's my assistant mechanic sale. And you present that to maybe some of the GMs and the bean counters and the sandwich makers, and those guys don't really get it, but you show that to people who are really used to kind of managing and dealing with numbers and stuff, and it's a pretty easy sell.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you just walk in and say, well, we just need more people because I feel like it, it's not going to fly.
No.
And I think it works the same way in construction, Kevin. It's the same deal. You know, a friend of mine who flips houses says it very clearly. He goes, I could work by myself and do the same work. It would take me 6 times as long. Or I could have my 5 guys and me, and I can do some other things, and they're probably better at some stuff than me.
Right.
And then we,
it's a perfect analogy.
Simple, right? Like, why is that so hard?
Yeah.
And then if these 2 guys want to go to Mexico for, a couple months, then we're going to have to slow our pace. We're not going to get as much done.
Right.
Or I'm going to have to find somebody that can do what that person can do. And I think a lot of times contractors tell me that they're really happy to talk to superintendents about time and material type relationships. And in a lot of cases, hey, you guys are providing the materials and stuff, we'll provide the labor and the equipment, and we're going to, you don't want to make too much of an accounting scene out of it, but what those people cost.
Right.
And what essentially you're renting that equipment from that, from that contractor and using their people, what the time and materials thing is.
Is that, in your opinion, is that a better way to go at this point? Or
I think
it depends on the scope, right?
It depends on the scope, and it depends on maybe it depends on the architect, and like with some of these guys who really want to get out in the field and design stuff with their paint guns and stuff like that, I would be T&M for just to keep myself out of trouble with that.
Right.
Like, okay, Mr. Architect, we'll build your great monuments to Mackenzie here.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it on a T&M basis, and I'm going to show you per square foot that we've doubled the cost per square foot of what a better billy bunker would be or whatever, because you're out here with your paint gun.
That's right. And anybody knows every arm wave of an architect costs you $1,000, right?
Absolutely. and every meeting in the field is another, and so, yeah, sure. Some greedy contractors are going to go, they got the stars in their eyes. Ding, 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 ding.
Change orders.
Ding, 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 ding. Change order.
Yep.
And so for some things, you don't want to be working that way.
Right.
Say, ding, 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 more time. That's not, and everybody's, getting paid fair. And it's, I don't want contractors not to make money. Builders got to make money. We all have to, businesses have to make money.
Right.
So it's not about, doing the gnarly thing that some superintendents try to do and just, beat these contractors to death, on the numbers to the point where the contractor gets smart and says, I'm just not going to send as many guys to the job.
Right.
That's how I survive this gig.
Yeah.
And so if I got 4 guys here doing this irrigation thing instead of 6, I'm going to hope to be profitable, and they're going to go a little bit slower.
Right. It's going to take you another, it'll be 6 weeks instead of 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So that whole, that manpower versus schedule thing, I think, is one of the pitfalls, kind of packaging this up, the TLDR is, if you don't understand the pace of things and what that costs, and that, yes, we can get that done much quicker. And it's a little bit more money right now, but it won't be money later.
Right.
And and you can never print more time.
Right.
I can't print more time.
So this wasn't on my list, but it came up in a conversation this morning with a superintendent that's looking at a renovation project, and they're going to do a trial run on some green work. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a great point. I think it's worthy of talking about, but his timeline going to split 9 and 9. on the major project. A little bit of bunker work, a little bit of green work, kind of an overall, but pretty big scope.
Yeah.
But they're going to do 9 a year, and he's going to do 1 green. I'm assuming it's a practice green as a trial this year. But he said, based on my estimation of the time that it's going to take to do that 9 holes, I'm going to do this trial run at the end of that time in year 2. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that I can see, when I've got the shortest window on that on the scope of that project, what do I need to plan for at the tail end? Along with that, I think knowing, some of the most valuable superintendent input, I think that can be added to the conversation is knowing weather conditions, knowing, having influence over that. Don't start a project in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho in November.
Right.
Because it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And then somebody's going to be pissed because on the tail end, you're still working on it at the first week in June when you expect it to be open then.
Yeah.
So I think having,
I'll never forget working with an architect one time on a warm season area. And this architect, he was so baffled. It was, it's like, listen, I don't expect to know everything about architecture, and I sure don't expect them to know about, turf grass, and especially the way we hyper focus and, and talk about it. But it shouldn't be a hard conversation to say, yes, I know you can come here in October and do all this work. Right. That's awesome. October and maybe part of November.
Right.
But one, this is our busy season here in the desert. And 2, I can't really plant Bermuda grass on that until August.
Right.
Or July or something. Right. So what I need you to do is come here and work in May and June. No, we can't do that. We're going to be on the East Coast. We got to, we got 54 square feet to add to a tee in, somewhere in New Hampshire.
Right.
We can't work. We want to be in Arizona in the winter. It's like, well, yeah, sure. We all do.
That's right.
But that doesn't fit our grassing thing. Well, can't you do something different? Can't you nurse crop? I remember this one architect telling me, can you just nurse crop the thing? They're like, no. Don't you get that all this ryegrass that you like and that you think is so pretty is all seeded into a Bermuda grass base? We have to.
Right.
So what are our options? Well, okay. Are we looking at sod? Are we looking at, all those sorts of things? And it's like, and so finally the tough conversation came down to, Mr. Architect, because you don't want to work here in May.
Probably not going to work.
Right. This job probably isn't going to work. And you're adding $22,000 an acre to our situation.
Right.
And we're renovating 8 acres or whatever here, or whatever that hole was, 12 acres. And so, that's $250,000 just because you don't wanna.
Right.
I don't think so. And I'm not trying to beat up on an architect here. I mean, a contractor, anybody's capable of that conversation. But but it's like, and they're like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, even the superintendent was going, wow, that's a lot of money. And it's like, yeah, see,
But again, it goes back to the value of having that experience, and regardless of what it costs the club, it's going to pay him back in the long run.
Yeah. And I don't, I have given up a long time ago trying to, to explain to somebody what the value is of, it's that great story about the dude who, charges, $400 an hour to show up and fix the boat, and he's there for 15 minutes, versus the other dude who had been there for, charging $40 an hour, had been there for 10 days.
Yeah.
What are you paying for?
Right.
You're paying for the fact that, you've been through this before. Right.
Exactly.
And so golf course superintendent who's never, this is the thing I'm looking for. It's like a super who says I can do anything, but they've never kind of been through it, in any part of their career, that's a tough one. And you got to kind of say, listen, I want to just kind of keep you out of trouble here.
Right. Yeah. It's for your own good.
But then, okay, so let's say we have this 3-phase plan instead of the 12-phase plan or whatever it was.
Right.
And then the super gets broken in, and they get the shorthand with the architect, and they get some, some people on the staff that can do the artwork, and they've got a contractor that they can trust for their, however it's going to work. And then round 2 gets really good. And And then and that's when you can maybe do, I hate this word value engineering, but that's when you maybe can do some value engineering and see if you can scrub some ends off of some things and, and work a little quicker or whatever it may be, but experience counts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You've learned a thing or two through that first stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Mr. Superintendent, why don't you want to learn? Remember the mantra of never stop learning. This is a great learning experience for you and for the club. And yes, the round one is probably going to cost a little more money. You're going to have to invest in some education and some resources, but round 2 and round 3 or whatever it may end up being is going to be really fun.
And that may be the point where you can, as a superintendent, you can offer some help from your staff because what your team is capable of doing and what's not going to cost you on the rest of the golf course, right? I mean, there's
absolutely.
Yeah, but just to stick your neck out like that on the front end seems like a slippery slope for a lot of guys. And I've had a lot of conversations where, you get to the end of a season and a guy's tackled a 1 or 2 green reconstruction during the season or off season. His guys are completely wasted. They're burned out. Yeah. He's tired. The members hate him. I mean, what did you save in that process? Nothing. Yeah. So as far as construction,
okay. So and can I just punctuate what you just said?
Absolutely.
Because in our world, that extra 10 or 15%, it can be costly, right? But it's also the difference between good and really good.
Yeah.
Great and really great.
Right.
And
in the worst case scenario, job and no job at the end of the project.
Well, sure.
Right.
So it's like this rush to get things done. I remember Tom Mead said this to me once. It was one of the best things that Tom's taught me. Just as a friend, and he just said, so many people are afraid of finish work, and they're afraid to walk away from something for a little bit because they get pushing.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta push. I gotta get this done. Go get the lights. Let's finish tonight, kind of thing.
Right.
And instead of getting away from it for a minute and then coming back to it and saying, wow, there's some ripple over there. And that head isn't right. And, and coming in and really fine tuning it. And I think that's where, he and Tom Doe, Corin Crenshaw, all those guys are, Dave Axland and Dan Proctor, amazing at being able to get away from something for a little bit and then come back and say, here's that extra 10 or 15% that I can give this. It's going to make it crazy good, instead of that push to, I gotta get this done,
right,
because of my ego or because of some number on a calendar or whatever. And we want to meet schedule, but what good does it do to, I remember a guy was all excited because he got a green finished. Dave, I got the green finish. And then I was there like a week later and it had all these ripples in it and everything. And said, shit, dude, it's going to take us forever to top dress that out.
Take you 2 months to get out of the mess you've left because you got
like, well, what could I have done? And I said, well, you could have just backed off a little bit, went and refloated that, spent some time with it, gotten off the Sand Pro and gotten the rake in your hands a little bit and just whistled a good tune while you were just doing better.
Right.
That's the hard stuff with this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
And so I say, well, do you want to just get it done or do you want to have it really great? Because it can be really great, or you can just get it done. I mean, and that's fine if that's what your thing is. Just get it done.
Right.
We'll do our best. But I love hunting for that 10 or 15% that, is going to make a difference. Right. And maybe that's what's wrong with our business, Kevin. Maybe we're too wrapped up in that little bit extra, always chasing the thing that the unobtainium, and maybe we're our own worst enemies when it comes to quality and things like that. But I still think that applied correctly, that kind of thinking can make a huge difference in an operation, in a project, in a management style, all that stuff. Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I rant.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about because I've just talked to too many superintendents in the last year or two that are they're just biting off too much and it ends up costing everybody in the end.
Hey, thanks again for listening. Amazingly, we're coming up on our 250th episode in the next couple of weeks. We we're so appreciative of your continued support of our podcast. The feedback's been great from the industry. I wanted to throw out a little bit of a plug if you're interested in jumping in with us. Between Jack and Joel and I, certainly Marshall, we'd love to have you on if you've got a compelling story. For me, I don't necessarily need to talk specifically about turf. I think there's so many great stories in the industry, both on and off the course that can be shared. But if you're interested in coming on and telling your story, contact one of us. We'd love to have you on. If you have questions, this is something I've been pushing for. If you have questions for the team, send them in. Each of our emails are our first name and then @soilfirst.com. So if you've got questions for us, send them to us. Maybe we'll read some on the air as we record the podcast. I think that's something that whether it's a question about a previously recorded podcast or a Q&A sort of session, that's something that I want to do in the future. But don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well, so you get our weekly updates. And again, like I said, thank you so much for the support, both on the podcast and with our company. It means the world to us, and hope you enjoyed this clip, if you will, of a podcast that was very, very popular.